Hello and welcome to the Manitoba School Boards Association webinar on community engagement. It's all about ensuring a public voice in public schools. My name is Janice Arnold and I'm the Board Development Consultant at MSBA. If you're listening to this as a recording, the original air date was November 25th, 2015. Therefore, interactive questions aren't available, but you can contact our office if you have any further questions. Just waiting for a moment while this presentation comes up. There you go. As shown on the title slide, this webinar is part of the E2G series on effective and efficient governance. E2G, it's part of the standards framework developed by MSBA for effective and efficient governance. And our framework, it's a piece that's really common to many school board associations. And it looks at how optimally functioning school boards strike a balance between efficiency and effectiveness. It addresses how boards may meet their needs for students and communities to the highest of standards. MSBA's E2G package, it contains many governance resources such as live and recorded webinars like this one, 5 to 10 minute trainer videos. They're found on our YouTube channel and they're known as Division Dispatches. They can also be accessed through our website. And there's in-person workshops that can be booked through me at the association office on any of these subjects. And then the material that's also available through any of these mediums I've just mentioned, and it's also on our website. If you look at the bottom right part of the presentation there, you'll see the E2G logo, and it's really the identifier for any of the pieces in this package. So we will get started. The key is with community engagement is always to remember that it is the public that owns the system. The way in which the school board engages the public is, in a way, it's antithetical to the notion of genuine engagement. You don't own the system, you represent its needs and balance competing interests. You can't take a proprietary stance. So there we are, and I'm going to stay on for this next while as we go through a few of these slides. So what it says here is public education in a democracy must always have as its principle the idea that public schools are the people's schools. So you want to keep in mind that we are one of maybe thousands within our school divisions. We must communicate about how and why we do things and about how we engage our public. There are social changes and trends that make genuine engagement challenging. So diverse and mobile populations, multiple and competing expectations, education as a commodity, increased pressures for accountability, and loss of confidence in public institutions. But we are compelled to engage people. Before people, they trusted in the system. Now people expect to be more involved and they want to question. There can be sometimes a general cynicism. Unlike, for example, the medical community or mining or whatever, people, they have this feeling that in the good old days, they went to school, so they're an expert too. As well, the general public is elected to sit on the school board, and anyone can do this. You're just, they see you as you're one of us. So we know as well as you do. You should engage people in a way that they want to be engaged, or through the mediums that they like using technology, for example. So an example of this is an unemployed youth and those with only part-time work. They're really a rich, untapped vein of volunteer manpower. What if you brought them in? But then you may need to recognize that you might have to step a bit outside your comfort zone, and it might not actually go as you had envisioned it might. But If you think about that, to start, you can't ask them in and then just give them tasks, the ones that you have been doing. You try, maybe a better approach would be giving them the end point, the goal, giving them some power, the objective, and then asking them how they might get to that end point. It might not really be as you imagined. I remember thinking, there was an example. It was at the the Walker Art Gallery in Minneapolis. They weren't expecting much, but they did agree to host. It was an event screening YouTube videos of cats. Yes, cats. But throngs of people showed up. Many, they brought their pets. They dressed up as cats. There were also, there's enthusiastic participation in sculptures of cats made from butter or lard. They thought that they might get 300 to 400 people. There were 12,000 people who paid $25 just to get in. So you have an end point in mind, but who knows what that path will take, and but it might just be successful. So thinking outside the box and letting people also take some of the reins. Next, thinking about using the medium that they use. It's easy to bemoan the fact that today's youth, they spend every waking hour staring at glowing screens. But if technology is their current obsession, then you might consider bringing it into the mix. Maybe a texting contest or organizing a flash mob or whatever the case may be. The message here is you can't problem solve your way into the future. Instead of seeing the problems that need to be solved, you start trying to see the possibilities. So it was Jamie Vollmer who came up with the word nostalgia, which is a combination of nostalgia and amnesia. When I went to school, it should be like that, and they know best. So the equation can be broken down like this. A represents the age of the person, X is just a multiplier, by, and the O represents the number of years that they've been out of school. And you put these together, and there's your nostalgia quotient. It's really them saying, what they know. We often think we know what they want or what they need. We need to think about, how do we know what we know or don't know? There are a number of ways we need to stay connected. These ways include mapping communities, both as a whole and considering small pockets of communities, meeting them at their convenience, meeting them on their turf, and looking at really what is meaningful to them. It's also important to assess where you are at now. Some ways of doing that are thinking about who you've been reaching out to and in what ways. Considering who is responding to your efforts. Is it just the parent council, the business community, or special interest groups? You should think about who has the most input into the school board. Who is the squeaky wheel? Who will make themselves be heard? Consider if you are finding responses limited, or are you missing some? Have you been hearing from everybody? Let's take a minute to look at these words. Information dissemination, communication, advocacy, public relations, engagement, message management. In what ways are they similar or different? It's time to think about involving or really engaging your community in what you're doing. It's not just about pushing information at them, really thinking about that engagement. So the core values for practicing public participation. Those affected, they do have the right to be involved, a promise that the contribution will influence the outcome, sustainable decisions, including all, involvement of those infected, multiple modalities for participation and access to information to allow participation, and then there's, of course, accountability. So I'm going to touch on a few of these as core values for genuine participation. There's an entire spectrum of engagement from the very low, where you tell them directly, this is how it will be, to the very high, where engagement is really collaborative. There are a few core values for the practice of public participation, and as I said there, they are as follows. There's the belief that those who are affected by a decision, they do have the right to be involved in the decision-making process. Also, the promise that the public's contribution will influence the decision, and that it's not just token participation. Public participation, it promotes sustainable decisions by recognizing and communicating the needs and interests of all participants, including the decision makers. And it seeks out and facilitates the involvement of those potentially affected by or interested in a decision. Participation from the public seeks input from participants in designing how they participate. And it provides participants with the information they need to participate in a meaningful way. And finally, it communicates to participants how their input affects the decision. So making sure that they see themselves once that decision has been made. There are times when only information sharing is necessary. That's all they're going to get. But at that time, you need to make sure that they understand that they don't need to make a decision. So be clear they won't be making the decision or be part of it. You're just letting them know. One example I heard about here in Winnipeg was when parents had been complaining long and loud about some changes to busing, and they wanted more involvement. But do they really? The proposal came to the board to take busing away for grades 7 and 8, but parents disagreed and asked if they could strike a committee to look at it. So the decision, it was handed to this group of parents. They took an entire year and they came back the same with no consensus or alternative solution. So this was instructive because they couldn't make the decision, but they also now understand the complexity of making that decision. We sometimes shield our communities from the information and the complexities of making those decisions. So letting them in and letting them see what it's based on, it sometimes becomes, you'll find that there's a lot more buy-in. We also need to remember that trustees have been elected and entrusted with making those decisions. So sometimes, even if it's tough, it is appropriate to make the decision. And remember that that's why they elected you. So, shying away from those decisions is not doing your job as a trustee. So this illustrates a shift from left to right, going from communication to engagement. It shows how different types of information, engagement, and decision making are there. There's different types of ways you can do that. They require movement at different degrees along that line there. It can be start with one way and move to the other, or it can be somewhere in between. It's complex and it changes with the issues, and it certainly changes with the players. Here are some characteristics of effective engagement. There's nothing worse than holding a meeting and no one comes, or there's no input. All you get are people looking at you, the deer in the headlights kind of look. So prior to and at a meeting, you need to answer their question. What's in it for me? Even after the meeting or an information session, or if you have some communication about to go out, take one more look back and see if it answers the question, what's in it for me from the participant point of view? An example might be an information session on insurance. Why do I want to go and listen to a session on changes to my health insurance? If it's portrayed as making it more efficient for the insurance company, I might not go. But if it's portrayed as me getting my money faster or making the steps to make it easier so I can get my money, that's something that I might actually relate to. So you need to be clear on why this is important to them and from their standpoint. It might not always match up with yours, but if you can get them there and participating, they may eventually come over to see that there's another reason for them doing it. If you get no one coming out, or that deer in the headlights look, before you start saying, it's due to apathy, or they don't care, so I'll make the decision, or they aren't in tune with what's going on, so that's why they don't come, or it's too complicated, so they can't understand, step back, take a long look, and make sure you say again what's in it for them and include that with it. You might ask the question, that if you don't have anyone coming, what did I do wrong? And what can I do differently? It's much easier to change yourself or your approach than to change them, of course. When engaging your community, it's useful to remember the diversity that exists there. Engagement should be framed in terms of their terms of reference. For example, how would you conduct a session or provide information in the same manner to the business community as you would, or would it be the same for a mom and tots group? I don't think so. I think they have different motivators. The question to consider is, how do you handle data collection and analysis? What feedback do you give them? What areas interest them? When framing the issue, there's a few things to look at. The first one is, of course, I said, what's in it for me? The next two are what's in it for the school board and, of course, the school division. It has to be usable, not just for the sake of engaging. We're just here so we can, all meet together and have coffee and then we go on our merry way. You can do everything right in terms of logistics. A matter of interest, a big issue, and really engage them. But to what purpose? Again, there's this expectation that you're engaging them for a reason. There's that concept of doing the right thing versus doing things right. So you can rent a meeting room, you can ensure the projector is working, you can provide a good snack, your papers are all in order, you have nice handouts. That's doing things right. But did you do the right thing? I think that's more important to answer. Try starting with an exhaustive list of all your community and include what are the interests particular to that group, what connections do you have to that particular group, and of course, understand what their motivation is. And it's likely different for every group you deal with, and so you're going to then have to have different messaging, but with the same goal in mind, keeping that same broad goal, but thinking about the messaging and what their motivators are. That'll help you really answer the what's in it for me question. Also answer what is that group's power or to influence others, and what is it and what's in it for the school board. So a few years ago, some of the schools were trying to get support for some programs for troubled kids. They didn't have much contact with the business community, and they didn't really understand why. I guess the board didn't, or the community, the business community didn't really understand why the board wanted to meet with them, or what they would even have in common. Why should they support a program for troubled kids? And they couldn't see any commonalities. The board hadn't really made that clear. The board was looking at ways for these students to learn and achieve and to keep them in school. So when the board finally did meet with with those businesses in their Chamber of Commerce, they looked at it from the Chamber's point of view. It was very clear to get them to care just by asking, do you want troubled kids hanging out at the mall? It brought it back home, it brought it to them. And how do you like that little guy? I hope we don't see that look when we have meetings. Many people said that one of the reasons Stéphane Dion, you might remember him from running as Prime Minister, ran in the election, but why he didn't get elected years ago, they said that one of the things was nobody understood what his point was. It was too convoluted. So you have to say too, do they understand you? There's lots of reasons why people, for example, don't vote. One of them, it has to do with perhaps the ballot question, like this one. And I'm going to tell you, this is what a ballot question was from the Concordia Student Union referendum. It said, do you approve and ratify bylaw 2010-2 adopted by the President on October 27, 2010, pursuant Section 7.1.2 of the General Bylaws of the CSU to give effect to a resolution about the Council representatives adopted on October 13, 2010 to increase the student building fund component currently at $2 per credit of the Concordia Student Union, etc., etc. I'm not even going to keep reading it all. But really what all they wanted to ask was, Concordia students, they currently pay a $2 credit fee to their student union, and that supposedly will one day go to building a student center. They're being asked to approve a $2.50 increase to that fee, which will be phased in over the next year and a half. Simple, plain language. Are you talking to your community in a language they understand, one that's relevant, one that they connect with? When connecting with the community, you need to make sure that you're working and at a level and to make sure that they understand what you're saying. If you ask them a question, it shouldn't be leading. I'm giving you the answer while I'm asking. And you also have to listen to what they have to say. So it's not just that token question. Or voters believe they have one vote sometimes, and it won't change anything. They report on what you did after. You need to report on what you did and after you heard from them. So, that you have to give them a feeling of ownership. Take every opportunity to let people know how much they're valued and how their opinions do count. So it's reporting back on what was done, and use the same language that you used to ask the question, or their language that they are giving to you. For example, I heard once of an employee survey. It showed employees asking for fitness memberships. The company couldn't afford it, so they actually brought in a wellness expert, but they didn't communicate that the cost issue, that it was too much to have pay for fitness memberships. So the employees, they just saw it as an easy out. So the company didn't, and they said that the company didn't even respond. So if you hear something that the community wants or needs, echo that back, and then say how it will be dealt with, even if it can't be dealt exactly as they want. Let them know that you've heard them. Show how they can affect change. In the actual process you are employing to engage the people, you need to question, is it actually working? I brought up the example before of how you would address a business community differently than, say, a mums and tots group. This is outside the school example, but I remember an experience where there was a local agricultural society, and they were concerned because the number of exhibitors at their summer fair, it was continually dropping. And I wanted my kids to enter some crafts, or they wanted to enter, and I called to inquire about dropping those off. And I was told that they could be dropped off on the Thursday before the fair between noon and 4 o'clock. But think about the number of parents that work these days compared to when the fair started 100 years ago. How responsive are you? How much are you helping your community connect? And how do you connect with shift workers, parent advisory councils, recent grads, or seniors? It all takes work, and you probably need to connect with those groups in different ways. Okay, we've consulted and had a dialogue but now we need to tell them what we've heard. If we don't implement the ideas, then they'll feel that they haven't been heard, or if we only implement them partly, then they'll wonder who else, or what thing is influencing you that you haven't implemented it exactly like I suggested. And this is why there are two things that you need to make sure you do. You tell them up front whether you are consulting with others, or what weight you will put towards certain parts of the input, and you be upfront on things like budget constraints. You need to enlighten them with what is going on within the whole division. And then the following was taken from, it's the Kettering Foundation, who does cooperative research. So what they were looking at was the relationship with institutions, a sense that what they say and think counts, an account of why board members make the decisions they make, and a sense that individuals who serve on boards are responsive to their concerns. This is what they found supports what we've been talking about. The question here, I guess, is, do you agree? Take a look at that. Are there other things that your board could add? Time to really think about what the people in your community want. A lot of engagement is reactive and telling, so think about how to truly engage and practice. I like this one. It says, the alternative to engaging with the public will not be an unengaged public, but rather a public with its own agenda, and an understandable hostility to decision-making processes that ignore them. So this is the consequence of not engaging, and it's the reality of many school divisions. So as with dictatorships, there is eventually a coup, as they say. So we've come to an end there. There's a lot of food for thought and some practical questions or processes that I'd encourage you to try next time you're looking at some community engagement. And I do wish you good luck with that, and I hope you do a lot of it, you do it well, and you do it continuously. Thanks for your time.